Party started. Guys, so thank you again for coming. Appreciate you giving up your Friday night. I know there's footy happening out there somewhere, so we'll do our best to get through it as quick as we can and get you guys home to the last part of it. But yeah, thanks again for the input that I've got out of those who've made comment and all that sort of stuff on what we did last time, and the feedback on the sessions for the QBA and all that sort of stuff. So far it's been pretty good. So we might just dive right in. Just to sort of recap what we did the last time, I spoke to you guys about the introduction, purpose and context, so where the QBA sort of fits into the baseball landscape, where you guys fit in to that long-term athlete development model for all of our athletes, how each of you guys is just as important as all the rest of the coaches that they'll have as they sort of pass through that long journey to hopefully elite competition somewhere. You guys are just as important as everybody else, so if you guys can see where you fit into that long-term pathway, that'll help you guys deliver your programs better, and it'll help you guys understand how important, you know, the whole process is, and that we all work together to have the best outcomes for our athletes. We talked a little bit about just understanding the coaching process. We talked about trying to make sure that if we're striving for coaching excellence, we want to make sure we know exactly what we're talking about. So we need to define it, and then we need to, you know, think about what things are included in the coaching process. We went through some of those things as well. We spoke at length about the long-term athlete development model that we're using, and we'll touch on it again tonight. But just wanted to refresh your memory of the things that we covered, and obviously we talked about some basic coaching theory. So Shane went through a fair bit of stuff. Come on in, mate. Haven't missed much. We just started. So that's pretty straightforward. What we're going to do tonight, going to continue with our discussion on some coaching theory, and then we're going to go through our hitting development model. So based on some resources that Dave Nielsen put together, there's been an adaptation of that through the Australian Baseball Federation. They've come up with their national hitting philosophy, which is not dissimilar to Dave's. It's basically the same philosophy with a couple of little modifications, and it's a pretty good philosophy. We've adopted it within Queensland. We've been applying it for the last few years. We really like it. It was interesting when it was first sort of introduced. It was a little bit different, but it certainly made a lot of sense to a few of us, and it's really, I guess, consistent with current learning theory, and you know, teaching research really supports this particular model compared to, you know, some of the previous stuff that had been produced. So we've adopted it. We really like it, and I think we're having some success with it. And I just want to make sure we have an opportunity to go through that in some detail tonight with you guys, so that we're all on the same page. And then we're going to go through the same process with understanding our throwing and pitching development model. So these are two of the key areas that are part of our development of each individual athlete. They're obviously developing their hitting and developing their throwing and pitching are two key elements. So what we're going to actually do is, before we get too far along in this, I'd just like to start with a little exercise. So if you all guys got at least some resources and stuff with you, we're going to do just a little practical exercise. So take out a piece of paper, please. So if you've got something printed, just turn it over, and on the back just can be a scrap. It's nothing too important. I'm going to break out a little stopwatch. So hopefully all of you guys have got a pen that works. Make sure it works before we start. All right, just to get the brain ticking. You guys ready? Mons, you going to do it? Another pen and paper. All right, so your challenge is, in 2 minutes, you guys are going to write down as many words as you can related to the sport of baseball. That's it, pretty simple. Ready? 2 minutes, as many words as you can that relate to baseball. Ready, set, go. Got 2 minutes. Doesn't matter what they are, they just have to relate in some capacity to baseball. And stop. Pens down. All right, so what we're going to do now, you're going to first and foremost is count how many words you wrote down the page. Does anyone have more than 30? Does anyone have more than 40? Does anyone have more than 45? How many you got?
47.
47, you're amazing. I always said you were above average. All right.
Can you read it? That's the question.
As long as you know what it is. All right. So they suggest that 45 is about the upper limit that generally most people can get. So anywhere in that vicinity is pretty good. Anything above 40 is great. Don't worry if you didn't get up at that level, it's okay. Now I want you to categorise them. I don't really care what categories they are, but here's a couple of examples of the types of words. So come up with the most common categories of words that you've got. So it could be pieces of equipment, it could be actually words about playing of the game, so actions and stuff like that. It could be players, it could be positions, it could be the actual process of training or coaching. All right, so categorise them, please. So work out basically how many you have in each of the key categories of words that you listed. Everybody done that yet? Doesn't matter if your categories aren't pardon? Sorry. If they aren't the same categories as those, it doesn't really matter. Just sort of roughly categorise them into sort of different types of words that you've listed. Has everybody got a phone with them, or are you guys really smart? What I want you to do now, and this is the one that we're most focused on, is I want you now to work out a percentage of your responses, how many of them relate to the coaching process. Keep going with your calculations. I'm just going to give you a bit of an explanation of the purpose. So the purpose of this is an example of action research. Action research is basically a method of self-reflection for you to assess behaviours of yourself, and it certainly relates to coaching. We're going to talk about it a little bit more, and this is an example of that, but it also gives you a bit of an indication when we think about baseball in general, what sort of proportion of your thoughts are about the coaching process. When you're involved in baseball, most people think about all the fun stuff and all the cool stuff, players, playing of the game and all that, but we actually spend very little of our time actually thinking about coaching as a component of that. And you guys who are all coaches, you would expect would probably have more than the general population. So it's just indicative of how you guys, I guess, associate when your thoughts about the game, how little we actually think about the coaching process. All right, so it doesn't really mean a whole lot, but just a bit of an example of some action research and a bit of indication of where we're at. So what we're going to talk about obviously tonight is a bit more theory about the coaching process, and I'm going to start with some questions for you guys to consider. We talked about this last time. If it takes 10,000 hours or approximately 10 years of deliberate practice to develop expertise, what does it take to keep an athlete interested for 10 years? Anyone?
I think you've got to get some degree of success.
You've got to have some degree of success, yep.
And fun.
Yeah, they've got to have fun, yep. Sorry, what was that, Karen? Sorry, Mumbles. Yeah, that's right. You've got to continue their development. You've got to always give them something new, some sort of new challenge. We talked about the video game theory last week, or last time. What else? Anything else?
I think the success is dependent on each player's definition. So some guys want to look good with their friends, other guys want self-improvement, achieve goals, whatever makes it enjoyable for them.
Yep. Yeah, very much so. Individuals will be motivated by different things, and some guys will be rewarded by learning new skills. Some guys will be more rewarded by the status of making a rep team. Other guys will be more rewarded by just hanging out with their mates, all that sort of stuff. And that certainly changes both within a group from individual to individual, but certainly within the same individual over that sort of time period of their involvement in the sport. But as we talked about last week, our role as coaches, and as you guys as coaches, as the extension of Baseball Queensland, part of our jobs is to try and keep these kids involved keep them in the game for 10 years. If we can keep them in the game for 10 years, then they have the potential to develop, you know, some skill so that we actually determine whether or not they could potentially become experts or not. If we lose them before 10 years, we'll never know their full potential. So we've got to try and keep them in the game for 10 years. If we keep them in the game for 10 years, we're a chance. That was one of the goals that we talked about, was part of the reason why we're here. We've got to try and keep them.